Seattle is changing. You hear that all the time. But what you hear doesn't necessarily translate to what you're listening to. My parents introduced me to music like Jimi Hendrix and Nirvana in Seattle, where I grew up, and the Velvet Underground and Grandmaster Flash in New York City, where they grew up. I used to want to be a part of all of those scenes, but life surprised me. After living as a musician in Seattle all of my life, I found that what I've connected with here, I couldn't imagine trading for another experience. We have an amazing opportunity to grow from past contributions and create something new together. It's happening rapidly across the city, and I asked 3 musicians to help me show some spaces that are strengthening Seattle through music. They are Julie C. of the Artist Coalition for Equitable Development, CarLarans of the Seattle nightlife talk show The Beats, and Reese Tanimura, who's actually going to introduce herself right now.
I'm Reese. I am a musician, the managing director of Northwest Folklife. I am currently the chair of the Seattle Music Commission, and I co-host a program on KBCS called Women Notes. I feel like all those aspects are the collaboration and conglomeration of my passion, which is lifting up voices and culture to create an equitable art scene here in Seattle. So when you first asked me about spaces who are strengthening our city through music, one of the first spots I thought of was Mose Auto, because here's a business owner who's bringing in her passion for the arts and making a space for those arts to thrive in a different setting, right?
Why, hello there. Welcome to Mose Auto. I don't think you've been here before, so let me show you around. From the fountain, she denied me passage and told me to go to the mountain. We work on everything from body parts, headlights, headlamps, anything that has to do with automotive, we can basically handle. So on top of doing that, I also want to open up the space, and I've been opening up my shop space for a very long time for women's-centric events, and I want to continue to do that. So my idea for the future is having this lift to be center stage, so we can move it up and down as the bands need to or as the DJs need to, and we can have a gathering place for women in a safe spot.
That night we went out there, Raechel's Children was opening up for Azucar Mose's Latinx Dance Night. And this is a great example of how businesses can use their space to uphold community for the arts. I just got my period, it's dripping down my legs. I just got my period, dripping down my legs.
Right off the bat, I think it was just super cool of Mose to open up her space, that way.
It was kind of cool to go into the space and it be just super empty, and then have it fill up with all the music gear and the film gear, because it was just a big empty room, and you could tell there's just cars outside. Then all of a sudden, an hour later, it's just like a club.
Yeah, it was fun to also play, and then it followed by a DJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, there's something really cool about doing music in a non club.
Yes,
somebody's intentional space, not focused on alcohol.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with alcohol.
no, sure, but yeah.
All these beautiful friends are coming together and want to have a good time and support one another. The intention is to support.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. And we were really fresh at that point too. So even for Mose, we'd be like, yeah, come on and play. We were super fresh. But everyone was there to to support Mose and this new endeavor of bringing arts and community and
creating that space.
Auto space. It's an auto shop also. Really, it's an auto shop, but
I want to see music integrated into more other things. Mm-hmm. I want to see more cross-disciplinary performance pieces. So music mixed with theater, mixed with lights, and I want to see more of that, because there's so much the art communities or the music community is its own scene, and there's so much other art out there, and everyone's kind of going through very similar stuff and has similar things to share. So I want to see more of that together, and I love seeing random places becoming music venues. There's this really cool clothing shop, vintage clothing shop up north, and they do shows once in a while, and I'm we gotta go play there. Just who doesn't want to play in a stack, a big rack of clothing,
take an amp out to the park, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? Come on in. Welcome to the shop. Welcome to Concuss.
Okay, before we hop into this next space, I would like you all to meet my friend Julie C., who is a longtime hip-hop artist in Seattle and a cultural organizer. You want to introduce this next space?
I'm so excited to be able to bring out to Concuss, because Concuss is a really special place. Not only sort of embodies the DIY spirit of Seattle music, but also they act as a huge resource to artists, as merch producers, as media producers, and also as a hub for culture bearers to transmit to the next generation a little bit about the history of hip-hop and heritage in this area.
Definitely the little shop that could, so we try really hard. And then back here I have my recording studio. This is where we film all the Radio Concuss episodes. Hollis Porter and Graves Hansen are my videographers, and they're super dope. And then, just try to do a little bit of the old school with the analog, and then also do the digital as well. I've been running some of this gear for 20 years, so especially the Stormtrooper. And then back here I have my drums and my vocal booth. Bring your snare, bring your hi-hats.
You are now tuned into Radio Concuss.
We'll take the robe off real quick. Yeah, we dropped the new album called 2KFG. Go get that anywhere albums are available. Want me to start? Okay, flip, merch, like a nigga whip, work, TG wet, worth, network, build my network, build my net worth, PayPal pimp, internet finesser, move it overseas, my CD come with a passport.
Do you feel what you're doing is important? Like, do you feel the importance of the impact that you have?
I guess, now that we're talking about it, I can think, but did I go in with that idea consciously? I don't think I did. So it's something that I've been learning as I've gone along. I'm going to lean pretty heavy on Julie for some input. Although I've done some really dope stuff, I don't think I'm utilizing it like you said, so I think I've seen the importance. And that's why I'm asking for help from people who are doing more stuff in these community spaces. What I've always done is had a dope spot and managed to curate a house that, whatever rent I could get, the cheapest rent, and have a recording studio in it that we could always come to and we could always party at and make music. And so now at this point in my career, I'm realizing my position and that I am trying to get more involved with the community spaces and doing that. I'm learning as I go to utilize my strengths and do what I can do to facilitate that.
I told them go and sell this dope shit, and what them niggas did, smoked it.
Like, what were the spaces that are really important to you that you think kind of held down community in the arts and music?
I got here in '89, and from the jump, I would say Langston Hughes Cultural Arts Center is the epicenter of Seattle hip hop and its origins, and it saved Seattle hip hop. And Steve Sneed and a lot of people who there, Darcel Lorraine, who are facilitators at the space, held space for hip hop when it was outlawed and not allowed to be downtown and not allowed to be in spaces like that. So it was community spaces, like you said, like Langston Hughes, and people who are of the community who preserve space in the Central District for people to come and hone and craft their art.
It's like Seattle is like an incubator. Like every form of art is open to you. When I got here, there was mad programs. Like I worked with youth the entire time I've been here. That was how I started here at Rotary Boys and Girls Club.
Sir Mix likes throw dances at the Rotary Boys and Girls Club.
Like Rotary opens up a whole lot of genres.
Right.
Like always somebody that branches off of that. Like somebody that doesn't maybe even write or go into an artist space and create. They just want to have it.
For me, the music and the art has always provided that. I mean, because that's what it is. It's like this broadcasting. Graffiti has always been that kind of thing where it's like you're just putting it out there and you're communicating with just so many people, you know what I mean? Whoever's on that frequency, you're automatically connected, you know?
So happy to be here, so happy to be here.
Now we can't find these spaces anymore. These spaces aren't available for like kids. like for youth. And that's really where it's at. Like, to kind of hone the next generation and groom them, they got to have the safe spaces to be at, to where they feel safe enough to express themselves, where they feel safe enough. But
they just use the room.
Yeah, like Washington Hall. Washington Hall has become the new Langston Hughes, honestly. That's what it's starting to look like, with all the things that are going down there with creative justice. And, you know, just because it's offering a safe space for kids to be.
I mean, it's a direct response to what the community needs. That's what makes it even dope. That's what makes me feel privileged to be a part of it. Like, it's a direct response to coffee room conversations. Like, damn, there's nowhere for us to be at. It's just crazy.
Human resources, what up?
Julie, Washington Hall was another space that you brought us to.
Yes, Washington Hall is a place that is very near and dear to my heart. However, it's hard to explain Washington Hall other than to say it's an important experiment at the intersection of community and historic preservation, cultural servitude, and the stewardship of space in an increasingly gentrified central district of Seattle. It's owned by a public development authority, Historic Seattle, but it is home to 206 Zulu, Voices Rising, Creative Justice, and Black Power Unlimited, which recently launched the opening of Cypher Cafe, which we'll be visiting.
And when we went to this opening of Cypher Cafe, we got to meet up with Sisters Rock the Arts, who were performing that night, and we got to talk with them a little bit about what having that space meant to them. Sister Love was saying that the area around them being gentrified was a historical area that housed some of the greatest artists to come out of Seattle, including Quincy Jones and Jimi Hendrix. Up and down Yesler and Jackson were spaces that Black artists would thrive and perform. They lived over there from being redlined, and they made amazing art and culture for the neighborhood, which is now a hot commodity for real estate where many Black people don't see the benefits and are gentrified out. Sister Love said that if places like Washington Hall and Cypher Cafe don't get the funds they need to survive, they too will close and the area will become exclusively white, and you won't be able to see the great art that makes the neighborhood such a wonderful place to live. Sister Love and Infinity challenge this issue of space through Sisters Rock the Arts, a platform for local artists to share their talent on stage at Roomba Notes every Thursday with a full house band provided called the New York Undercover Band. Sister Love had said that being Black women in the music industry, her and Infinity have dealt with oppression, patriarchy, and sexism that made it important for them to create a safe space for all people, no matter your age, sexual orientation, race, or gender identification. We spoke with Infinity about how having a space to share art tied into her work in health.
We as Sisters Rock the Arts are really focusing our attention on health and wellness this coming year. And I'm a certified nutritional therapist and a licensed clinical social worker. And so in my private practice, I treat a lot of people who are artists. Think about what you're eating, what are you consuming, what do you feed yourself? Because our art is an expression of what we've consumed. Yeah. And so oftentimes we consume crap through the vein of social media, through comparing ourselves with others, through, eating unhealthy standard American diets that come in packages and boxes and in cans and whatnot. And when we can begin to get closer and closer back to the center and to the truth and to wholeness, then we become whole and our art becomes whole and people can interpret that and feel that and see that. Well, we'll be doing a health and wellness bazaar and seminar here at Washington Hall with the Cypher Cafe on December 7th. One of our ways of merging what we do in the profession in the daylight and to what we do in the evenings. A lot of us know me and Infinity as the one who does those shows. And then they know me as Nichelle, as the one who they come to see in my office to help them through life issues that are showing up. So on Thursday nights, people show up every week. For 3.5 years, we've been doing our show, and they see it as a form of therapy, as healing. They feel that they have a place to let go of some of the stresses and the weight of the world and come and lay that down on the stage or on the mic, or just share in space with community, with other people who maybe relate to or look like them and can feel their own, feel what they're going through and help them through that. I've been doing this work off and on in different capacities for over 20 years, and the biggest setback and the biggest drawback and the biggest barrier has always been venue space. And having a space that we've never had a space of our own. We've always been at the mercy of, the owner. And when the owner, doesn't want to own anymore, then we get lost and we get dispersed and dismantled, and those who were building something have to start over. And then on top of that, being able to pay the artist, fair wages is so important, and so still not where it needs to be as, collective thought, at least, on what people deserve and how to afford it. I mean, because there's both sides of that, right? So when you're not the venue owner, you're also at the mercy of not having enough to be able to pay and be paid. There's really not yet a precedence set for how to compensate and show reciprocity. Having a space where, you're not here to get treatment, but you are being treated well, is important. Until we have broken down some of those barriers a little bit better. Yeah. It was healthcare systems that separated art from healing, and we're doing now, I think, as a community of people, we're doing a better job at bringing that back to full circle.
All right, where are we going next here, Reese?
Well, I'm really excited to go to the Clockout Lounge, which is in South Seattle. It's my neighborhood in Beacon Hill. And Jody is just somebody who has a great reputation for really caring for and centering artists and musicians and building community around that. My gravitation is towards businesses that are women or POC owned. The kind of intentionality around, like, when you walk in the space, there's a declaration, right, about that people are welcome here, and that the behavior needs to match.
We're back! Can we rock?
Nobody here would ever put up with any kind of racism or homophobia, and again, that's why we have that sign at the door. But I think it's really well known that we're not going to put up with that stuff. And I had a lot of frustrations working for other people because my hands were tied with a lot of things. My ideas of how artists should be treated or what I wanted to do for artists, I wasn't always able to do. I started seeing this thing that was happening around the city where there was like all these up and coming bands, but not a lot of places for them to play. The pop-up cultures started appealing to me, and I was like, okay, let's see if we can do this. Putting bands in places that were non-traditional seemed very interesting to me, and my business partner was like, what do you want to do next? And I was like, I was thinking I want to just own a little neighborhood bar. When you start thinking about what you want a place to be and what you want it to mean, to me it's always been about a community space. I hope to get to the point where people are just like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to Clockout. Like, it doesn't really matter what we're booking because people know that there's gonna be talent here. Being that it is a neighborhood, it was important to me that we were family friendly, so that people had a place where they could gather, meet their neighbors, bring their kids in, when we're doing school rock shows, and those are just awesome. We're really open to doing a lot of different things for the community. I'm doing an event for the school for library drive. I'm noticing the teachers at the school meet here every Friday. We're really providing a space for people to come together. It was very important to me that this was kept that we didn't come in and just gentrify the neighborhood. Obviously we did to an extent, but we were mindful. And for me, it was from the beginning, it was we need to have a space where artists and people can hang out and afford to hang out.
I mean, South Seattle is my home. I've been here in South Seattle since I moved here. I first moved to Hillman City, and it was very dangerous, the neighborhood I was living in, and I just kind of migrated my way up Rainier Avenue, and I was like, this is where I want to be. And it's I remember coming here almost 5 years ago now, and being the new kid on the block, everybody's on their own haunts, the Seattle culture of this is our space. I was the intruder there, and now in only 5 years, I feel very much at home in those spaces, as opposed to a lot of development that's happened. A lot of those businesses even I came into are gone, So this is actually like a bright spot. That the fact that the clock out has come here to South Seattle. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. It's like at least kind of a thing. Plus, I come here all the time. Like they got great karaoke here. It's just a place to come see really good shows and like just vibe and have good pizza. Like this is a space where musicians and locals come. Yeah. So I feel comfortable here. But there's a lot of changes that have happened where I just feel angry about a lot of the gentrification that's happened in South Seattle because I have friends that have been very much affected by it. And myself, like I can barely afford to live here anymore. And when I moved here, it was the cheapest neighborhood in town, So it's kind of good that this is here so that we have like an anchor for artists.
Most of my bartenders are musicians, and I wanted to do that so that people could go on tour and have faith that they would be able to come back and have a job. We're very thoughtful and supporting artists all around, even within our own organization. It costs a lot of money to open a room, and it sucks. It totally sucks, because for me, I don't want to book for the sake of booking. I want to book things that I'm passionate about. We always offer to like help pay for a poster design. I think our social media is really unique in the way that we have a guy that's doing our social media that's actual photographer. There's been many nights where he's met with the bands in advance and took band promo photos for them, shoots live and makes videos. So we try our best to like just give a little bit extra. With that, like we feed bands when they come in. We do what we can because it's important to me that bands realize like it doesn't fall short to me that I have a packed room because you guys did your work too. I've partnered with PBR to do a new music showcase night so that we could do like a $5 cover. I know there's a lot of up and coming bands out there that haven't had a platform to play on a stage with an actual PA, and also it's for a night for me where I can invite out my friends that are promoters and bookers and DJs or whatever and be like, hey, these are the 3 bands I picked for this month. Come check them out. And then maybe they'll get an opening gig elsewhere too out of the deal. So I'm like, again, I feel like that's got lost a little bit, is like we need to be a platform for up and coming artists and help show what our local scene is about.
I'm glad you said that, because I think like what you're talking about is that reciprocal nature that I think that sometimes it's an us versus them. It's like the venue and you have to crack the venue, and I think that places where I see, where the venue and their staff are really trying to work with the groups and be in community in terms of like promotion, and there is a success built into that because social media is just an amplifier of your network, right? Mm-hmm. So your core network is those folks who do believe in what you're doing and trust you. And so even if I, may not know any band on a bill, I'd be like, well, I just want to go out and hang out with people, and I know that the music is going to be interesting, or I'm going to discover something.
Next up, an introduction.
Yeah.
To the one and only CarLarans.
You wanna walk like me, you wanna talk like me, you wanna floss like me and be a boss like me, you wanna rap like me, you wanna clap like me. It's not a game I see, it's my reality.
You might know CarLarans as an electro hip-hop artist. Maybe you've heard his Black and Gold EP, or seen his newest video, Vibes, which is off of his Raw Honey album, featured in the Seattle Times. It's also possible you know him as a co-captain of Rainbow Rebellion, a charitable organization and clothing line that specializes in custom and hand-painted pride wear. But I was introduced to CarLarans as a host on The Beat, and I'm gonna let him tell you all about that.
Seattle's hottest nightlife, music, talk show, where I interrogate some of Seattle's finest music artists, getting the steamiest tea on their lives, love, and the pursuit of being accepted as a queer artist in today's society. Am I right?
I have learned that there's a lot to building a queer space that people feel safe coming to. Even me as the host, just me hosting an event is not enough.
I want to be adored more, tripping over your love, forward on my forehead at the time I'm trying to rewind.
So we've had to change locations. We were in Belltown, and that was one of the feedbacks we got, is that people didn't feel comfortable in that neighborhood. So coming here where it's a known space where they do so good at making this place safe and policing who's here and making sure everyone's held accountable for what they're doing, and all of that kind of stuff has really made the difference, I think, in the show. Production itself has changed a little bit. When the show first started, I was like the artist handler. That was my thing, is booking the talent and making sure that they had everything they need, because as an artist, I know certain organizations don't realize what artists need, as far as like, we need to know details of the show, the times we're going on, just little things that a lot of people don't think about. So I think being an artist definitely helped. The biggest part of that is pay. A lot of artists are super underpaid, so that was the thing. I was like, okay, if we're gonna do this show, each artist is gonna be paid like what they deserve to be paid.
Oh, wow.
And so whatever we need to do that out of pocket, however it needs to come, artists need to be paid. And I think a lot of people do this like split the door type deal, but then if no one shows up, no one gets paid. And I just am so against that. And it's hard for new organizers, I get it, but that's kind of one major thing that I push for. And I think being an artist is just kind of, I have a good understanding of all those things when doing the show.
Art it's not like quite a material value, but it has tangible value in other ways. Like it can help people with depression. It can help if you're having a bad day, but it can help also like bring people out and form communities. If you're doing work, building communities, making connections, healing people, then you should be paid for all of that.
Yes, handsomely.
Yeah.
That's important work.
Everything that it takes to love me, I make it so fucking easy for you to love me.
CarLarans took us to Julia's on Broadway to see a show called Proud, featuring all local talent who identify as queer, performing covers that lead into original music. Ran by Thaddeus Wilson, Proud also donates a portion of its proceeds to Lambert House.
If you see a favorite sign at the side of the road that says 15 miles to the
A lot of like dedicated queer spaces, but there's dedicated queer events. And one of the first ones I was ever booked at was actually Proud, which is hosted, of course, by Seattle's own merman, Thaddeus.
So Proud actually started as Prideful, with the idea that we were, creating a space for queer musicians and making awareness for them. In my experience, it was, especially in the queer community, it was all this worship towards drag queens and drag kings and just kind of drag in general. And I've kind of always had this thing in the back of my mind. I was like, the queer talent, spans so much more than that. And it's really hard for us to, sometimes me, dressed as crazy as I am, even when I first started, I dressed crazy, to get booked at some of these other venues across town. I want to be in a space where people don't look at me like I'm a freak or that I'm weird or that question why I'm singing about a guy on stage. I wanted to be booked in those queer spaces, and I wanted other queer artists to get on stage and be booked in those queer spaces to where we're at that point where we aren't queer musicians. We're just another musician. Many other queer organizers that kind of just in the last few years been pushing this queer music movement. It's just not getting traction because it's not familiar, and I think that's kind of the biggest problem. So once I moved to Julia's on Broadway and we did a couple shows there and they were kind of hit or miss, and then kind of when I revamped it and turned it around and kind of flipped it on its butt, made it a big, pretty sparkling production, it really started to pull people. But there's also a piece of me that almost kind of dies inside because I have to do that to get butts in the seats. But my thought process is like the long goal is like I may be doing this big sparkly production and I may be asking a lot of artists and asking them to sometimes compromise what they're doing. But I know that in a few years or 5 or 6 years, a lot of these queer local artists that maybe use the beat or use Proud will get more exposure, might be seen more, because everyone connects with the familiar.
Getting funding for queer programming is becoming easier, but it's definitely still a challenge. And what we were finding too is like funding may come for, a few productions, but then it goes away. And so again, finding someone to build. My thing is, I think I want to, because the beat started, we were featuring up and coming artists. That was the thing, is that people that don't necessarily have the platform yet, but are on the rise. And so I felt it was really important to set a precedent for this is what you deserve to be paid as an artist if you're working professionally. This is the going rate that you should expect and that you should be asking from organizers, because this is what your art is worth.
When Proud first started, it was tips, because the theater just couldn't afford to pay 3 or 4 different acts or 3 or 4 different bands in one night. So it was just tips. And also, I think at the time when I had started Proud a couple of years ago, even with Prideful, it was just, I didn't think there wasn't an audience. Like, to be honest, like, what I had heard prior to me starting, because we started our shows, which I don't think we realized, like almost within like a few months of each other. And we didn't like even realize it. Prior to us starting our shows, I think I would hear once in a blue moon, like maybe once every 2 years of like a queer music show. It was really underground. So when Proud started and it was tips as a producer and someone who's produced events in the past where I pay people their worth, it was kind of like gut stabbing, but it was also like, well, I'm not really getting paid anything. There is no scene there. I don't know of any people in the scene that would come to a queer, music event, and it's original music too. Like the last product I pushed really hard with video. We did like 2 video shoots. We did photo shoots.
The promo was epic. It really was.
And I told them a pay rate, and then I told them like a higher rate if we like sell out the show. So there was that initiative to get them to promote more, and they promoted like crazy.
Oh, that's really smart.
Yeah, and we like quadrupled the audience.
So we're at Vermilion Gallery. My name is Jessica Ramirez. I'm the curator of the Indigenous Latinx exhibits at Vermilion. This show has been a 3-month installation that really explores Indigenous identity. It's been a space that we've really been able to take over, and Diana, who is the owner of Vermilion, has done an incredible job of making an accessible space to artists who have never shown, for some artists who have never shown before on gallery walls. For me, it was really important that even though Capitol Hill is changing, it was really important to ground the work of what artists are doing across the city, especially marginalized artists that you don't often see in these spaces. here we have Juan Salinas. Juan Salinas is an artist who is actually a student of some of the muralists from Mexico City, the most famous muralists like Siqueiros and Diego Rivera. He's an 80-year-old man who is so prolific that he's known to actually paint over his canvases of finished art. So it's really humbling, and I'm honored to be able to show his work in this space.
We are in a very commodified, value-based society right now. I think that, we're just kind of losing touch with the value of relationships and the value of expression. We've gotten voted Best Art Gallery a few times through People's Choice or various magazines and stuff and publications in town. And I can be a little bit jaded and go, well, it's probably because it's the first art gallery a lot of people have ever been in, the people that are voting and reading those magazines and stuff. But I'm not gonna disregard that either. That's how I got exposed to art, was sitting in a coffee shop and seeing photography around me and then commenting on it, and then the waitress was like, well, that's my art. And I was like, that is exactly what I want to do. I want to create situations like that for people. I feel like I'm able to sort of cheerlead a little and say, I know you don't like the weekends, the bros and everything, but I gotta tell you.
Bros.
Yeah, but sometimes I'm stuck here, working, and I'll see somebody who seems like a bro, like a group of 5 people or something, and they're just doing their thing. And one of them will just be like, bring his girlfriend or something, and they'll be like, check this out, like it's a little secret thing. There's
like
always one person that's got like some creative bone in their body,
Yeah.
And to win over somebody like that when you thought they were the enemy is super challenging and exciting to me. Being able to expose people to stuff, and that's kind of my dark side, manipulate them a little bit,
I think I always get encouraged when I run into people who are new to the city, especially if they're like the stereotypical, moved here to work for Amazon type thing, but like they're into it, and I think that there's a lot more folks like that than we would assume sometimes. Like how to reach them is a whole different thing, and it's always frustrating because people will line up outside and they'll be like lining up outside to listen to the same 5 songs they play on the radio when there'll be like a really dope live band in here.
Okay, Reese, let us know why we're here.
Well, I'm really excited to have a conversation with Don Farwell, who not only has a great recording studio, but has started a festival, Earwig Fest, with the bands that he records. And Selena Whitaker-Paquiet, who founded Hoodstock in her home in the Central District.
Well, I run a recording studio called Earwig, and I've always been looking for ways to kind of stay connected to my community of bands that record with me. And so the original location of the studio was down in Georgetown, and it was really close to Slim's, a venue. And I would always meet, my studio down there was really small, so I'd meet bands at the bar. And I was talking with a guy named Steve Bergstrom from the Finger Guns, and he had this idea, he's like, oh, you should do a show here of bands you record. And I thought that was a great idea. And so after the first year, I opened in 2010. After being around for the first year, I invited bands I had recorded that year to do an all-day long festival. It started as Earfest, then it turned into Earwig Fest.
If you look at folk life now, it's definitely like a big undertaking. It's still very grassroots in that it's a lot of community programmers and involvement. But it also started kind of as a DIY thing with like a bunch of folks that were like, we really should get a lot of the folks in our community together and showcase all the great art that's going on in the Northwest.
I started my own festival with my band Night Train 10 years ago. This will be our 11th year. My festival is held out of my house, which we call the Milky Way House.
Yeah.
So the thing with that, because we hold it outside, is that I physically go around to all of my neighbors within a 2-block radius and introduce myself. When I took the year off, I was really amazed to have many of my neighbors express disappointment that I wasn't doing the festival that year. They felt that was the only time that they really got to meet everybody and to see everyone and to hang out with the neighborhood. So
Folklife is one of the festivals that, you know, you can find some community there, and I think that was a big key, and it still is for me in any festival, whether it's DIY or commercial. Like the hope is that at the fundamental core, like, it's building a community. One of the things that was so interesting to me about like just finding about Earwig Fest was because like that idea of like you go to a place and you record, and that's such a, it's a great thing because you can get your music out there, but it's an insular act. But by bringing folks who have done that same thing and know what it takes to do that process together, it also builds that community.
I love that feeling of just of camaraderie. When you're a musician, I think there's this feeling of being on the outside looking in. I think that's kind of like the feeling of being an artist, really. I've played in bands, so I know how hard it is when you're trying to get shows and get people to come out to shows. And so Earwig Fest is very well attended. I mean, there's so many bands that play out throughout the day that it just turns into like a giant backyard party.
the Earwig Festival is well attended. Folklife is fairly well attended. You know, we cater to 250,000 people over a weekend, and Hoodstock gets well attended. One of the things that I saw recently on Facebook was from one of the bookers where they were complaining that they don't have attendance at the shows. And why is it that the DIY house shows and homegrown festivals and so forth do tend to do better? The answer is because of those festivals, you do tend to get a better recognition, often slightly better monetary, worth, and then there's just that sense of community that comes with it. How do we bring that then to these bar venues where these show venues?
The arts generally, but especially like music venues. It's a Wild West kind of situation of business, right? Like some of the things we've been talking about, in the creative economy sort of conversation is like, how can we maybe even like gather some idea of what a standard would be so that people know as an artist, maybe if people are trying to engage me to play or whatever, that I should be at least asking for these things.
So this documentary does focus a lot on those bright points. I don't want to say that, the economic problems and the infrastructural problems are not a problem. It's definitely, it's raising a lot of problems. It's very real, I just wanted to see that there are parallels to it as well, and there are a lot of amazing things happening. But thinking about that context of like, we have this amazing arts community here in Seattle, parallel to all these changes. When you think about those new changes and the new people that it's bringing here, new businesses and new tech workers and the likes of that, do you want these new people at your events and in your communities?
Well, they already are. In order to understand your community, you have to understand how it's changing.
And your house is in the Central District, mm-hmm. And you said before you go around knocking on door to door talking about Hoodstock to your neighbors. When you see new faces coming into the neighborhood, what do you want from them in terms of
I immediately want to get to know them. I want them to understand the history of the neighborhood that they're living in. It was one of the first African American neighborhoods, middle class neighborhoods that developed in Seattle, and now it's not that anymore. The properties have gone way up in value, so it's become, pardon my expression, very whitewashed. But yet you still have a lot of like African businesses, there's still pockets of diversity. Just for me, it's still my neighborhood, It's still a place that I love and grew up in, and because my neighbors are changing doesn't necessarily make me love my neighborhood any less.
Like, the more I think about that question, I say yes, definitely, because I think even as I have been a transplant, right, like a little more than 10 years ago, like the way that I got into communities and was welcomed into communities helped me understand more about how to move and be in the world. And if you are consistently like us versus them, you don't have a chance to talk about like, yeah, we are a city that has a lot of great art. In order to support great art, there is a culture that has to be able to understand that that takes as much time and energy as a computer programming job, or as, the things that, are sort of typically thought about as professions and jobs. And I think it's also, recognizing that there are a lot of great things going on here and how to do a better job of like decreasing the obstacles. We desperately need to just be focusing on like what is going well, how can we keep that going, how can we interrupt things that are declining, like the loss of space, venues, cultural space, all those things.
I made a new friend recently. He moved here from Chile to work for Amazon. I met him seeing Los Betamax from Chile play Blue Moon Tavern. He was hosting them at his house. He told me, wherever I go, I look to the local bands for an understanding of a place, because the music of a city is a great testament of the development of culture. I am an immigrant, but I also understand why people are upset at the big business coming into the city and contributing to gentrification. You have a right to be upset. I don't want to be part of destroying a culture. I love that Seattle is a destination for music, and I get to see bands from all around the world at places like Tim's Tavern and Lo-Fi. You get to be up close to the bands and get to experience this unique sort of energy from them. At the same time, I see a separation between new incomers and the locals, and I don't think that we should be creating our stories ourselves. Technology is one part of it, and art is another. I want both newcomers and locals to acknowledge the reality that we are all here together, and we can make something of that. My friend's words made me question if there is a way to make our arts more sustainable with the growth of our city. What commonalities do we all share that we can prosper off of? There's way too much opportunity in our city to fit into this film, so I'm going to leave you with this. I've asked a few artists around town to tell me their favorite spots for music. Please check these places out and support the growth of music in our city.
Hi, I'm John Paul Sharp. I'm a singer-songwriter from Seattle, and I do monthly concerts right out of Gallery 1412, where I'm a member of the Artist Collective here.
Hi, we're Darksmith.
And we love the Cha-Cha Lounge.
And Fred Wildlife Records.
We love Fred Wildlife because it's a really great hub where the intersection of music, visual arts, and film can exist.
We love the Cha-Cha Lounge because we had a great Pride show there last year, and they treat the musicians really well, and they put on free shows on the hill, which is great.
Hi everyone, my name is Albina Cabrera. I'm a music journalist and producer from Argentina and came here to work at KXP and El Sonido. Tarot Cactus is one of my favorite bands because they could mix the Argentine flavors with the Seattle culture, and we need this kind of project.
Hi, I'm Tarot Cactus. I really like the Nectar Lounge because they bring a lot of Latin world music from around the world to Seattle and pair them up with local artists like me.
Hey, this is Duma Mall. We're here at the Fortress with the chickens. You can see them. But this is a house venue that the 6950 Collective likes to play at a lot. They have a bunch of all ages shows, and it feels like our second home, so come check it out.
Hi, we're the Black Tones.
And we're shouting out Hollow Earth Radio for helping me get my start on the airwaves.
And for allowing me to host Spaceship Radio.
Hollow Earth Radio is awesome because they have a ton of shows and they also host live shows.
Live shows, great programming, multiple different diverse shows for you to listen to. 104.9 FM
or www.hollowearthradio.org.